Hello everyone. Like a lot of Cavan people, a lot of people at the moment in Cavan are just sick and fucking tired. And we have to say it straight though, sick and fucking tired of the political establishment, of the system. The system is out to get them in a lot of cases, particularly young people my age in their 20s. They've no hope in Cavan alone, to get a house to rent at a reasonable rate. We're not talking about you're giving them for free or to the Irish people, but I'm saying at a reasonable rate that it can be affordable and a few bob left at the end of the week for them. But unfortunately, in Cavan, is the reality now that it's nearly getting this worse as Dublin and stuff, that people can't afford to rent a house in Cavan. It's absolutely insane. It would have been inconceivable back in the 90s that a young person in their 20s, even at the end of the 20s, going into their 30s or 40s, can't leave their own home house because they can't get a place in Cavan at a decent rate. In some cases in Cavan, I think there was one property in Ballyjim stuff, they were looking for €1,000 a month, €1,000 a month for a property in the back end of nowhere in Ballyjim stuff. €1,000 please. With only three rooms, that's all. A bedroom, a bathroom, and a small kitchen, and that's it. You want €1,000 please. It's daylight robbery, it really is, and Cavan people can see it. Cavan people know when it's daylight robbery, they can feel it in their bones. But long story short, I want to just talk about the lack of leadership in this county, along with that, because a lot of people feel in this county that our Lord Mayor, a majority of the Lord Mayors over the time are very weak and just refuse to say anything. Our current Lord Mayor refused to say anything at all. Sits there and says nothing. A lot of them, and a lot of councillors too, we see them, they haven't said boo all about the few protests, the people struggling, etc. They're too afraid, a lot of our Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, which makes up the majority of the council in Cavan, are too afraid to speak. They're afraid of their life to say boo. It's simple as that. They're afraid to say boo to Fianna Fáil leadership, Fine Gael leadership. And they're going to suffer, and I'm just going to say that they're going to suffer in the next election, they will. Because they won't speak. The simple that they should be able to speak. They shouldn't be afraid to speak, because a lot of them are just too afraid, and that's the simple. And I know a lot of them. I know particularly a lot of the Fianna Fáil councillors in my area here at Cavan, Tobit. And they're decent people. Don't get me wrong, they're nice people. They're not like there's a few of them that are a bit off. They shouldn't be councillors. But there's a lot of them are very decent people. They're nice enough people. They're not like heinous people. A lot of them are just too afraid in a lot of cases. And I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that straight out. That a lot of them can see what's happening in the country. They don't agree with what's happening, but they just remain silent. And to be totally honest with you, that's nearly worse than not that saying something, not saying anything, like sticking with them at all, is saying nothing when you see evil. Because every time I see something, I say it. Simple as that, because that's what you should do. That's the right thing to do, even though it will cost you a job, even though it will cost you your paycheck, whatever it does. At the end of the day, when you see something wrong and you know it's wrong, speak up, say about it, speak it. Especially if you're a leader in a leadership position as a TD, a councillor, or senator. You have a duty, not an obligation, you have a duty to your people, the constituents, to speak up. And a lot of the councillors refuse to say anything, refuse to talk. They're talking in the council chamber nonsense a lot of the time. They're talking about things that people couldn't give a shit about, to be put lightly. That's as simple as that. And the simple reality is, people have lost faith in their councillors. A lot of them, but this is the thing, I never forget, I was at a bus stop outside Cavan Institute there, when the last local election, just before I went to Finland that time. And I never forget, there was a councillor for years, Madeleine Larkin, her daughter, is now a councillor in this area. And she was there for a long time. She must have been there 40 years as a councillor in Cavan. I can say, 30 years definitely, I can't remember exactly. But long story, probably Fine Gael. But I remember her going around canvassing for her daughter at the bus stop. And this person, and this was a young woman, an Irish woman, about maybe, let's give her a take, 26 or so. She had a young child on a farm. The child was maybe about 3 or something, maybe 2. But long story short, the Madeleine Larkin, the councillor, went up to this woman and asked her, would you vote for my daughter, Fine Gael? And the woman was like, who are you? Basically, who are you? And she was like, I'm a councillor, I'm a current councillor. So I was here for the last 20-something years. And the biggest thing I noticed was the woman said, I never heard of you in my life. And she's all her life in Cavan and stuff. And I even know the woman. I've seen her many, many times when I was younger too. And even remember, I remember when she was growing up, when she was little too. And she said to her, I never heard of you in my life. And she was there as a councillor for the last 30-something years. She never heard of her. And it just goes to show you how irrelevant, too, a lot of the councillors are. And that just goes to show you, too, that Madeleine Larkin wasn't with the people in a lot of cases. Because every young person should know who their councillors are, who their TDs, Chocty Dollars, and senators know. And the only reason how they don't know, because a lot of them are nowhere to be found. It's simple as that, nowhere to be found. Nowhere to be found at all. There's no leadership in this county. What I mean to say is people should know who their councillors, even for only people, a lot of them couldn't tell you who the local TD is, who the local councillor is, because there's no addition. Like, let's put it straight, that's the simple truth. Because they won't speak out. If they spoke out and said, look, what is happening to our county, mass immigration, the cost of living, etc., and speaking out and absolutely fucking tearing the government a new one. Because at the moment saying, oh, we hear the councillors go on Joe Finnegan in the morning, oh, shuds off, oh, Jesus Christ. And, but they go on like that, but they won't say this is a fucking disgrace. People should be up in arms. People should be fucking tearing the system down. But they won't say anything like that. I know that's very extreme. But we have to be extreme nowadays because unfortunately the system has let us down. And the only way to get the system to work with the people is to be extreme, is to fight the system, because the system is not going to reform itself. It's if you fight the system and reject the system and destroy the system, that's the only way the system is going to listen to you. And what I mean by this is the institutions of the state against the Irish people, not and against the people of Cavan. And we see this time and time again. And again, I don't blame a lot of the councillors. I couldn't name them out by name here, but I won't give them, I will spare them that indignity. I will, and that's being fair. I couldn't name them out here, called every one of them out if I wanted to. But I'm sparing them that dignity. I have some kind of decent respect for people, not to shout them down. Because at the end of the day, we all are human. I understand that. But at the end of the day, you have a duty to the people who elected you to speak out. And that's what I'm coming from. That's as simple as that. But if you dare, if any of the councillors dare not speak out when something else bad happens, they're in for it. Let's put it that way. But they should be. Like, every councillor in this county should be up in arms. Should be up in arms. Should be nearly calling for Cavan, for independence for Cavan. That's really what they should be calling, because of the criminality we've been treated at by the government in Dublin, by the European Union, etc. Every councillor should be saying we should secede from the Irish Republic and declare ourselves independent. Because that's what they should be doing, or we should have a referendum to break away from the Republic of Ireland if the government does not start listening to the concerns of the Cavan people. And the simple reality is, and this is just the fact, unfortunately, a lot of them won't admit it, that so many young Cavan people, and even older people, are struggling to live. Struggling for the basics, food and electricity and the rent. And the basics. We're not talking about going off to Ibiza for 5 weeks or whatever. We're talking about just the basic day-to-day etc. Getting a bit of bread, getting a bit of milk, putting a bit of fuel into the house to keep it warm during the winter. Going maybe, get shopping, going to work, etc., paying your taxes, coming home paying a huge amount of rent. And then obviously we have the huge amount of people leaving Cavan that never return, unfortunately. And that's criminal. That's criminal. That is generally criminal. And it's evil. Not even criminal, it's evil. It's satanic, I would go as far as saying. But what I say to the people of Cavan, to speak up, encourage your councillors, and I say to you, to encourage them, because again, if people stand with their councillors and say to their councillors, you should be speaking up, you should be fighting for the people, you should stand with the people, not the government, not the institutions, not the state. You should stand with the people who voted for you, the people who you serve, the people who pays your wages. That's a true councillor, when you see somebody that's willing to stand with the people, because it's very hard to stand against the system. It's very hard to stand up and say, no, I won't. But if you have somebody like that, you have a real leader. You have a real leader that's willing to stand, because it takes guts. Leadership is all about guts. And the woman behind me is a great example of a woman with guts and determination. But unfortunately, that's lacking in Cavan, due to a lot of, as Sanna Mountain would say herself, a lot of people are too afraid. A lot of our councillors are too afraid. Too many politicians are too afraid to do the decisions because they're afraid. Simple as that. And it's the truth, and regardless of what you say, it is the truth in a lot of cases. Nearly, I would say, 95% of the councillors in Cavan are too afraid for that. That's all. Simple, just too afraid. The other half just couldn't be bothered and just couldn't give a shit. I won't name them, but we all know who probably they are. But they couldn't give a shit. But I would say to the people, and even say to my Chocty dollars, the 5 of them in Cavan and the senators, that you have an obligation too, not even as councillors. Councillors are the people that are supposed to be on the ground, the grassroots. The Chocty dollars, etc., up in Dublin, etc., and the senators, they're not so much on the ground, but the councillors in the locality. But I say to the people, of Cavan, always fight for your county, always fight for what's right, always stand up, even though it's hard, it's tough. I've done it, I've lost stuff over it. I've lost, and I probably will to the end of my life, but I think it's worth it. It's worth to stand up for the truth, it's worth to stand up for what is right, and it's worth to stand up for your feelings and what you think. And I'd say that to people. I never regret doing it, because I done the right thing. I know I'm doing the right thing, and I go to my grave thinking that. And I know it in my heart and soul. But yeah, thank you.